This, like I explained before, is obviously a better alternative than what the US is doing in the status quo, which is why we're so proud to propose.
Okay, all right. I thank the first speaker for their remarks, and I call upon the first speaker for opposition to open the opposition case. Here.
Perfect. So my time starts now. A world that undermines democracy creates a overall less stable world, and a world that has been proven to be worse than a US hegemony time over time is a world that we on side opposition so strongly oppose today. Good morning, and as the first speaker on side opposition, what I'm going to be doing for you is I'm going to be running through my two contentions, which is first of all, how in a multipolar world, democracy will always be threatened and undermined, and second of all, how a US hegemony has been proven to be a lot more stable than a multipolar world. Then I'm going to be moving on to refutation, and I'm going to be refuting everything that the first speaker of side proposition has said for you today. So first of all, I'm going to be moving on to my first point, which is that in a multipolar world, democracy is undoubtedly going to be undermined. So why is this, right? This is because in a multipolar world, the only forces that will actually rise up against the US as a US hegemony is forces that are largely anti-democratic, right? And we can see this through examples in the past or even in the present, right? The world is currently shifting to a multipolar world, and the forces that are rising up against the US are China and Russia, right? Both anti-democratic countries. So we can see that in a multipolar world, the forces that do actually rise up against the US are anti-democratic. And this is obviously a terrible thing, right? Because democracy is one of the only systems of government in which the people actually have freedom to make a choice, in which the people actually have freedom to have the say in who they want to govern themselves, right? So why in a multipolar world, why in a hegemonic world will these other democratic forces not try to rise up against the US, right? Why is it going to be anti-democratic forces? Well, because as we can see from history, there's never been a recorded instance in which two democratic countries have fought each other, whether it's in a war or whether it's in a proxy war, right? There's never been a single recorded instance in history of this happening, and we don't believe it will happen, right? So we see that the only forces that actually will rise up against the US will be anti-democratic forces, and we don't see how side proposition could ever actually propose this motion knowing that it's going to lead to the weakening of democracy, right? So now I'm going to be moving on to my second point, which is that a hegemonic world is much more beneficial because it leads to a more stable and democratic world. So in a hegemonic world, wars are a lot less likely to break out. Why is this, right? This is because in a hegemony, there is a lot more stable system of power. With one person on top, or with one country on top, it's very easy for countries to know who is the leader here, right? And we can see this through examples of economy, right? How everybody keeps on referring to US bonds as the golden standard, right? As the golden currency. Because people rely on the US, because people need a leader, because people need a country to actually be a hegemonic state, right? Because people need to recognize leadership. And if we allow a multipolar world to happen, where we allow people to threaten this leadership, it's going to lead to a lot of different things, such as war, economic downfall, and a lot worse economy. But you seem to disagree.
Do you really think that, America is really enforcing leadership in, for example, Liberia?
Okay, so while America might not be enforcing leadership right now, there's a really good reason for that. And the reason for that is actually because the world is slowly shifting to a multipolar world right now, right? The US doesn't have as much power as it used to have in the, say, 1980s or something, when it was a truly hegemonic world, right? The reason the US isn't intervening in foreign policies as much is because the world is shifting to multipolar, and the US sees the threat of countries such as Russia or China rising up to oppose them, right? So we can use the example that side proposition gave and turn it against them, because we see that the only reason this is happening, it is because of a multipolar world, right? So we see all the devastating results that a multipolar world could lead to. And now I'm going to be continuing my second point about how a hegemonic world is ultimately more stable. This is because, first of all, there will be less war. Why will there be less war, right? As I've explained before, first of all, no one's going to want to take this position from the USA, right? No, thank you. No one's going to want to be this hegemonic state because they realize that it's going to lead to a not only economic downfall, but they realize they're going to get a lot less trade from it, right? For example, if Russia and the US are trading, and say Russia trades 5 apples for 4 bananas that the US gives, once the Russia tries to rise up and overtake US as this hegemony, they realize that they won't be able to trade, apples for bananas anymore. Or in a real life case, maybe oil, maybe gold, or maybe something that is infinitely valuable to say Russia or the US. So we see that in a hegemonic world, no thank you, nobody is going to want to overtake the US. But even if we take side proposition at their best, even if we do assume that people will try to overtake the US as a big hegemonic state, we see that they won't be successful, right? We see that in a true hegemonic world, US will have a lot of power, and so therefore they're going to be able to shut down anybody who does try to, oppose them, or anybody who does try to overtake them as this hegemonic leader, right? So why is a hegemony better? Well, because first of all, there will be less wars, as I've proven. Less wars means a better economy, right? The US spends around $100 billion on military, which is an absurd amount of money for just a military, right? Russia and China spending both around equally as much is also a ridiculous notion. If we are able to cut down on the amount of wars, we see that we could save not only millions, but billions, hundreds of billions of dollars just by simply decreasing war, right? So we see that first of all, the economy is going to be much better because there's less war. We see that second of all, the world is going to be a much more peaceful place because once again, there is less war. And we see that in a hegemonic state, there will be a more freer market, right? So a more free market leads to things such as more free trade, which is obviously better for everybody because this means that people have access to better quality products for a lower price, right? A free market is a better thing for everybody. And we see that a hegemony will lead to this. So now I'm going to be going over some refutations, and I'm going to be refuting pretty much everything that the first speaker on side proposition has given us so far, unless the other side has a POI for me.
Thank you. Do you believe that hypocrisy is a very good goal for the United States as a policy?
We believe that obviously hypocrisy is never a good thing, and we don't really see how that relates to the topic at hand because the other side hasn't provided any examples whatsoever of hypocrisy. But even if they do provide examples, we believe that it's not going to be bad enough to counteract the hundreds of negative things that are going to happen if we do bring a multipolar world, right? So now I'm going to be refuting everything that the other side has given us so far, right? First of all, the other side talks about how US is unfit to be a hegemonic state because, the president has a possibility of changing every 4 years because leadership may change every 4 years, right? First of all, we'd like to say that it's unlikely there's a new president every 4 years, right? It's very unlikely. But even if we do assume that this happens, we still see that there aren't going to be anywhere near as much negative repercussions as the other side says, right? The US president isn't going to go back on what the previous US president did for foreign policy, and so because it's a giant waste of time and money. And so their point about these, foreign countries having to adjust every 4 years is simply wouldn't work because first of all, it's not going to be as much as 4 years. And second of all, even if it is, these US presidents aren't going to go back on what the previous US presidents did. And for those reasons, I'm so proud to oppose.
And I call upon the first opposition speaker to give a summary speech not exceeding 4 minutes. Here.
All right, thank you very much. And my time starts now. This debate today has boiled down to 2 main points of clash, 2 main topics and ideas that we on side opposition and them on side proposition have argued about and talked about the most, right? These 2 points of clash would be, first of all, which system leads to more war, and second of all, which system benefits the economic state of the world better. Now, I have chosen these 2 points of clash because they were the most important point of clash of this debate that I believe were talked about, right? War is obviously an essential part of this debate, and economics was also a very key part of this debate, right? So I'm going to be explaining to you on how we on side opposition have won on both of these points of clash, right? So we're going to be starting with the point of clash about economics, right? And we're going to be explaining to you why we on side opposition have beat side proposition in this little mini debate about economics, right? So in the topic of economics, side proposition has given you the example of Liberia and how it's struggling, right? For we believe that the only reason Liberia is struggling, as they've said, is because the world is slowly shifting to a multipolar state, right? It's because the US is unable to help Liberia. It's because the US doesn't have as much power as they used to because the world is becoming multipolar, that they're unable to help these people in need, and that's why they're unable to actually help Liberia, right? So what have we said on this point of clash about economics, right? We've given you 3 whole reasons why a hegemonic world where US is the main hegemony is going to lead to an increase in economics, right? First of all, there's going to be less wars, as me and my partners have both explained, and seeing that side proposition hasn't refuted it so far or given any type of, argument towards it, we see that they also, sort of believe us, right? There will be less wars in a hegemonic state. So obviously, less wars will lead to less money spent, right? Whether it's on the military or whether it's on ammunition or guns, there will be a lot less money spent if there are less wars, right? Another reason why the economy will be a lot better in a hegemonic state is because there will be a free market, right? A free market is going to happen, as I've explained, in a hegemonic world only and not in a multipolar world. And as I've explained, a free market is essential to a good economy, right? And also, third of all, countries will spend a lot of money on the same thing, as my partner stated, right? Whether it's on, medicine research, the US could spend billions of dollars trying to find a cure for a medicine that, sort of Russia is also trying to spend a lot of money to find, which is just leading to a lot of wasted money, right? So we see that we on side opposition have undoubtedly won this point of clash about economics because we've given you 3 whole reasons why our side of the house is more beneficial towards economics, and the other side has just given you an example which we have taken down, right? Now I'm going to be moving on to the point of clash about war, and why we on side opposition have won this point of clash, and how we on side opposition are going to bring you a lot less war than side proposition, right? Side proposition essentially runs this argument that says there's going to be a lot more war because people want to be this hegemonic power, right? As I've already explained to you, this isn't true because no one wants to be the hegemonic state because they realize that it's going to be a lot less trade, right? As the second speaker on the other side already said, countries are greedy, and so therefore they're not going to risk trading with the main power just to have a chance at taking them down, right? Even if they do, as my partner has already explained, this simply won't work because the US, as this large hegemonic power, will be able to shut them down without much money spent and without much lives lost, right? So what have I done for you today? I've given you these 2 main points of clash about, first of all, economics and about, second of all, war, and I've explained to you why side opposition has beaten side proposition in both of these points of clash, and for those reasons, I'm so proud today to propose.